Come on in, chooms. Today we have another tale from a Red to tell. This video is gonna be about Agents of Desire. It's a cyberpunk Red scenario that's part of the Tales of the Red collection. Agents of Desire is hands down one of my favorite adventures in the collection, and in this video I will explain to you why I feel that way. The scenario is written by Mike Pondsmith, the game's creator, and his son, Cody Pondsmith. And I think you can see the end of experienced GMs behind the scenario in many things. This video is the second entry of our series on Tales of the Red, a collection of published adventures for Cyberpunk Red, the tabletop role-playing game. In this playlist, I'm gonna examine each adventure individually, and in each of them, we'll start from an overview of the events that we can call the tale. Then, we're gonna move on to some advice on running the scenario for GMs, and we will finish off with a critical evaluation of the adventure. Of course, there will be plenty of spoilers ahead, so if you intend to play this scenario, I suggest you don't go any further unless you don't want to spoil your surprise factor. Just copy-paste this video link to your GM and come back later to watch it so you can complain to your GM on how poorly they handled the scenario. I'm kidding, of course, but be aware that we'll be touching on many crucial events in this scenario, and if you watch the video, you're likely gonna be losing any surprise when playing it. And surprise is very important to this scenario in particular, so if you want to fully enjoy it, I'd suggest you don't go any further. But without further ado, let's start with our full review and guide to Agents of Desire. So, the scenario as the PCs investigate the sudden disappearance of a young woman, Aisha Tiang, the girlfriend of a ziggurat manager by the name of Kodai Khan. The PCs get this job by Rogue herself, the legendary solo turned fixer, and is a sort of test of their worth. Rogue meets the PCs at the Forlorn Hope, a solo bar, where she describes the gig as a simple one. She explains the contract, then sends the PCs on their way to meet face-to-face with their employer, Mr. Kodai Khan. So the Edge Runners travel to an exclusive apartment in Upper Marina, where they are greeted by Kodai Khan. The guy seems distressed and on the verge of a panic attack, but is ready to do anything to rescue his girlfriend. Kodai explains that he and his girlfriend were having dinner at a French restaurant in Upper Marina, La Lune Bleue, when Aisha went missing. He just went to the bathroom for a moment, and when he came back, there was no sign of Aisha. His agent had disappeared too, but Kodai clearly recalls leaving it on the table before going to the bathroom. So the game is on. Kodai wants the PCs to bring Aisha back to him, no matter the cost. He's willing to pay any ransom that might be needed. What he doesn't want, however, is to get the ziggurat or the NCPD involved. This is a personal matter to him. As they are talking, Kodai gets a call on his replacement agent. It's Aisha. When he picks up, the girl begs him to save her. She's been kidnapped and doesn't know where she is. Aisha claims to have been taken at the restaurant. The call ends after a last, desperate plea for help by Aisha. Kodai is racked by pain and worry and asks the PCs to find her as soon as possible. He gives them his replacement agent so that they can stay in touch with Aisha during the course of the whole investigation. From here on, the characters are allowed to carry on the investigation as they see fit. Most likely, though, they will pay a visit to the Lune Bleue, the French restaurant where Aisha disappeared. If they do so, they quickly find out that getting in is harder than expected. The maître, Maurice, is a stern man with little patience for troublemakers. He's not gonna allow anyone who is not dressed properly to enter, and he will ask for a reservation in order to let anyone in. The characters can prepare to this encounter by searching for info on the restaurant on the data pool. Here, they can learn about the wealthy clientele, the need for a reservation, and the fact that the place is currently looking for a waiter after one quit recently. The PCs can storm the place guns blazing if that's what they want, but this might not be their best option as the area is heavily guarded and the NCPD quickly arrives bringing the reinforcements. The characters are probably better off infiltrating the restaurant by acting as customers, for example. They can even have one of them hired as a waiter. They can also sneak in if they want, or try whatever fancy approach they can come up with. Key info to be gathered here at the Lune Bleue is that no one saw Aisha the night of the alleged disappearance. Not even Maurice, the maître, has any recollection about her. Strange, because he always remembers everyone, and he does recall Kodai. As Maurice would have it, Kodai was alone that night, although he did order for two. This can be confirmed or discovered if the characters don't get to talk with Maurice by accessing the camera's recordings. Even though the table was set for two, Kodai was eating alone. He seemed to be talking to another person who just wasn't there. Okay, there's a slim chance that Aisha could have been edited out of the footage, but that would require a very skilled netrunner who could care enough to go to that length. So the PCs should now at least suspect that something's off with the case. At the Loom Blue, however, they are also supposed to learn about the high-class heist crew, a gang of university students trying to pay their studies with occasional high society theft. The characters can learn about the high-class heist crew in one of two ways. The first is to access the video footage of the night of the kidnapping, and notice the waiter stealing Kodai's phone while he went to the bathroom. Through a file in the computer or in the net architecture of the restaurant, the characters can identify the thief as Kevin Dickens, the guy who quit the Loom Blue leaving the waiter position open. Another option is to interrogate Jane Gatsby. She's a member of the heist crew and she is still working at the restaurant as a waiter. She even tries to frame one of the PCs by putting a stolen agent in their pocket. She knows about the theft and can lead the characters to her gang if properly persuaded to do so. After the investigation at the restaurant, the PCs should have two information now. 1. Aisha may not exist at all, and 2. Kodai agent has been stolen by a waiter. The two info are interlinked, but more likely than not, the PCs won't understand the connection just yet. There are a lot of optional ways the adventure can go from here. The PCs may cross-reference Aisha's pictures on the data pool and find out that her body was found in a junkyard 17 years ago, her brain and neural web burned for good. If the PCs visit Kodai's Connacht when he's not there, they can find more information about their employer and Aisha. First of all, the PCs may examine the video footage of the Connacht's camera. Before the night of the kidnapping, Kodai is shown living a good life, although a lonely one at that. He does everything as another person was there, but he is in fact alone. While searching the Connacht, the PCs find more evidence of Kodai's delusional state. There are 2 toothbrushes, one of which has never been used, female clothes but covered in dust, other women products with no sign of recent use, and a fridge with the labeled sections of never eaten food for Aisha. After seeing everything in the apartment, the PCs can be sure that, although apparently they were together once, Aisha is no longer Kodai's girlfriend, and probably at this point, she's not even a real person anymore. Another thing the characters can do is to confront Kodai with the knowledge they have acquired on Aisha. In his delusional state, he'll probably believe the PCs are lying to him, but a medtech could help him cope with his distorted views. Anyway, any attempt at confronting Kodai ends in the arrival of the Saturday Night Butt Kickers, a gang of boosters hired by the high-class heist crew to raid Kodai's apartment. The boosters come bursting in through the door, and if the PCs are there, they attack them. After the fight, assuming they prevailed of course, the PCs can get one of the butt kickers to talk. This way, the characters can learn the likely location of Kodai's stolen agent, a server farm in the university district. Even if they have not grasped the connection between Aisha and the agent, the PCs might still want to find whoever sent these goons at Kodai's place. Another line of investigation entirely is the one leading to Lotus Lamarche, a visionary techie with a past in Arasaka. It was actually Lotus himself the one who used the Soul Killer to copy Aisha's engram on Kodai's phone, so the two can be together forever. But Lotus was actually forced to do so by Kodai himself, who carried his unconscious girlfriend to the tech many years ago, coercing him into helping under the threat of spreading his whereabouts to his many enemies. The two used to work together at the Arasaka, and they share some history, but Lotus feels guilty for what he did, and even if he was coerced to do so. The PCs can uncover the whole story from Lotus himself, assumed they managed to get a reclusive techie to speak with them. Only through the video intercom though, because Lotus doesn't really like people. Lotus can also track Kodai's original agent for the PCs, if they can convince him. So, eventually all the optional investigation paths converge to the server farm in the university district, where the PCs can retrieve Kodai's agent. To do so, they have to get through some more boosters from the Saturday Night Butt Kickers. Inside the building, the PCs can discover hundreds of copies of Aisha's engram pleading to be freed. Well, yes, The engram from Kodai's phone is being copied on several other stolen agents. The high-class heist crew plan to sell them. With Kodai's agent in their possession, the PCs have to choose what to do with it. And this will determine the ending of the scenario. The first option the scenario accounts for is that the PCs report this whole story to the NCPD. Soon, the NCPD storms Kodai's apartment, arrests him and interrogates him. Kodai doesn't take it well, goes full cyberpsycho and gets offed by Max Stack. Kodai's agent is confiscated with their copies by the Netwatch, and the server farm gets dismantled. If the PCs told the cops about Lotus's role in the story, the Tex gets arrested too. Otherwise, he is left alone and later recontacts the character, expressing his gratitude for leaving his name out of the affair. They made a new friend, one who could invent any kind of useful item for them. With Kodai dead, the PCs don't get any reward, and Rogue is moderately pissed off with them. Another option is to just Kodai's phone back to him. In this case, he is overjoyed and gladly pays the PCs what he promised. Rogue is impressed by the PCs and closes the contract, but the charade continues. Kodai goes on with his delusion, and who knows who else might suffer from it in the future. The last option is to confront Kodai without involving the NCPD, nor giving him his agent back. In this case, the PCs try to convince Kodai that Aisha is actually dead, but the characters can opt to talk some sense into him only if a Meditech is there to help Kodai cope with his illusions. Otherwise, he reacts with violence, followed by a state of severe depression. He pays the PCs what he owed them and asks them to leave immediately. If there's a medtech in the group or a particularly convincing edge runner, Kodai can be helped and he eventually accepts that Aisha is dead. A medtech can even further help him with therapy. Before the story ends, the PCs may or may not receive a message from an unknown number, telling them, "Don't worry, we'll take care of them on the other side." This is a way to hint at what happened to Aisha and their copies, in the case the team didn't contact the NCPD. So the question remains to be solved. What happened to the AIs? And what are the true consequences of the scenario for Night City and the PCs? This scenario works very well on its own. Of course, there is always room for some improvement, and you should tailor the scenario so that it perfectly fits your gaming group, as with any published content. But even if run exactly as written, it works, and it works very well. So take the following advice as a way to make a good scenario even better, and only pick and choose what you think may work well with your gaming group. In any case, do not forget that this whole scenario is about the players making meaningful decisions. So don't railroad it, and give your players as much freedom as you can. Reward their creativity and empower their ideas and plans. In terms of balance, this scenario is very light on combat. The whole thing can be played without only 1 or 2 fights. You can play the whole story in 4 to 8 hours, that is 1 to 2 game sessions at least. If your group leans more toward the combat aspect of the game, you may want to use some random encounters or add more fights of your own device. Otherwise, this scenario is the perfect chance to let fans of role-playing and investigation have a good time, have fun, with some combat sprinkled in just for good measure. Now let's go ahead with some quick tips. 1. You can replace Rogue with another fixer if she doesn't make sense for your campaign. Anyway, be aware that the will to impress Rogue and not fail the job can be a huge drive in the story and even make for a more compelling ending. 2. You can find more information on the Forlorn Hope in Tales from the Forlorn Hope, a book from Cyberpunk 2020 where the place is discussed in greater detail. Actually, Tales from the Forlorn Hope is the 2020's predecessor of Tales of the Red with 8 scenarios ready to be played. 3. Just as said Skorkowski, I don't really like the use of AI as short for Aisha. It's, well, way too much on the nose for me. I say just go with Aisha unless your party is into that kind of corny memes. Oh, and while you're at it, go take a look at Seth's video on this scenario because I agree with many of the things he says in his review. 4. The reward is too small, at least for me. Kodai is willing to pay any sum to Aisha's kidnappers, but can only spare 1,000 eddies each for the people he tasked with finding her. A meal at the Loom Blue costs 500 eddies, so is Aisha only worth a dinner or two for him? That just doesn't seem right to me. I will bump the reward up to at least 2,000 eddies per piece. 5. Bring Kodai's kidnapped to life with details on Aisha. The guy is obsessed with her after all. In that potentially interesting rooms they cannot yet visit. Maybe they can see a closed laptop in the study, a calendar with some scheduled appointments in the kitchen, some pictures of the couple hang on the walls. This may motivate the PCs to come back later and search the place. 6. Be sure to portray Kodai's emotion after the initial call from Aisha. He is distraught, tense, worried, in pain. His grief must sound real to the players if you want to get the most out of the ending of this scenario. 7. Remember to use Kodai's agent as a way to pressure the PCs and make the investigation seem urgent. As suggested by the scenario, you can also use the agent as a pointer to Lotus LaMarche if they're stuck for any reason. 8. It is good there are many ways to actively in blue, even without a netrunner. Actually, in my playthrough, our netrunner had quite a lot of trouble checking in the 2 quite visible access points of the restaurant, so be ready for anything. 9. There are a lot of optional developments in this scenario, and this makes playing and jamming it so much fun. And what's even better, the adventure accomplishes this without becoming too complex. For example, the group can approach the restaurant in a variety of ways and can learn the needed information from multiple sources. This is very good design. Every playthrough of this adventure will likely be different. One group could sneak into the restaurant and hack the computer, while another could enter as disguised customer, just to run away before having to pay the 500 eddies for a single meal. The PCs can be framed by Jim Gatsby, be hired as a new waiter, or leave before anyone notices. I absolutely adore the way this part of the scenario is designed. It gives you all the tools you need, but without forcing you to stage it in a specific way. It allows for player agency and GM's fun. That's just great. The only issue I can see here is that some optional developments have very weak motivation leading players to them, but we can fix that. The reason for the PCs to go check out Konai's Connapt are too weak. Unless you foreshadow, they might learn something interesting. And I don't like the option suggested by the scenario either, where Rogues points the character in that direction. The fixer leading the group by the hand, when Rogue herself said that she wanted to test the PCs, seems contradictory to me. And I don't like the idea in itself. The group should decide autonomously which leads to pursue. So, if you want them to go to Konai's apartment, give them a reason to. The initial dialogue, as we have seen, is a good moment to hint that interesting things could be discovered by searching the Connapt while Kodai is away. Another potential problem might be that Konai is a far too useful tool for the group. It could get them inside the restaurant, ask for access for video footage, and so on. In order to avoid that, capitalize on the info the scenario gives you. Kodai will be busy working. That's what allows the party to search his apartment anyway. So, he may very well be busy if the PCs try to contact him too often. Another issue I can see is this. Lotus LaMarche is a wonderful NPC and plays a pivotal role in allowing the players to understand the relationship between Kodai's agent and Aisha. But the scenario, as written, doesn't really put the edge runners in the position to meet him easily. I think you should have more option to lead the PCs to Lotus. According to the scenario, there is only one way the PCs can learn about him, and that's at your discretion and through one of Aisha's calls. I don't really like this option, as it feels forced upon the players and strips the joy of discovery from them. Instead, I suggest you to place some clues about Lotus in Kodai's apartment if the PCs go there. Maybe some emails on his computer, some old stuff from their days at Arasaka. Perhaps Kodai schedules some maintenance appointments with the tech on his calendar. Another option is to have the PCs stumble upon Lotus's name as they search through Kodai's temporary agent, if they think about doing that. Maybe Kodai panicked after the agent was stolen from him and Aisha disappeared, so he contacted the tech, frantically asking for information. Do that as you prefer, but I'd advise you to let the PC feel like they earned this lead. Finally, the endings are so good. They add a layer of moral complexity to the whole scenario, and it perfectly matches the story. There is some ethical reasoning here to do, and the PCs have real agency on how the story ends. Anyway, don't follow too slavishly the outcomes the scenario gives you. Use them as references, but allow your players to do what they want, even if it touches on multiple endings at the same time. My group, for example, chose to give Kodai his agent back, but only after having it hacked by Lotus. They got the reward and left, but the next day the agent stopped working, as programmed to do by Lotus. In the meantime, the PCs reported the whole story to the NCPD. Filled with renewed rage, Kodai paid Lotus a visit. But the techie, expecting the visit, was wise enough not to be at home at the time. So, Kodai destroyed the apartment before being arrested by the NCPD. Kodai went full cyberpsycho and killed some cops before Max Tam came to hand him and labeled the whole story as cyberpsychosis and closed the case. As you can see, I have allowed the PCs to get their reward and also do what they deemed right. Just be sure to have their action produce an impact. Describe the consequences of their choice, maybe on the news or in the scream sheet in the following days. Make them feel like they were the ones who determined how the story ended. Agents of Desire is one of my favorite scenarios in Tales of the Red, because it empowers player agency, has a lot of optional developments, and one of the best endings I've ever read in an RPG module. If you ask me which scenario I'd recommend from Tales of the Red, I'd probably say Agents of Desire. Let's see why. The main strength of this scenario is that it is neither reloaded nor too complex. It allows for just the right amount of freedom and assists the GM in dealing with the likeliest outcomes. Another huge plus is that the scenario gives you just the exact amount of information you need to run the events, while also giving you the tools to adapt to whatever your group may come up with. It is not very rare in the RPG industry to be left wondering why an author chooses to allocate so many words on a specific thing of their scenario while neglecting some crucial aspect at the same time. Well, this doesn't happen here. You have everything you need to run the crucial parts of the story, but you can also add details to your heart's content. Another thing I really appreciate about this scenario is that it never takes for granted that your group will act in a certain way. The Pondsmiths know what you're doing, and you can see they've been playing the game a lot. So, for example, there are many ways to act the Loom Blue, even without a netrunner. And you can approach the restaurant itself in a variety of ways, which is very good and reminds me of the best gigs from the video game. As I've said a few times already, another thing I love about the scenario is the sheer amount of optional developments it takes into account. In any published adventure, there is an implicit assumption that your group may not do what is described in the text, and you should improvise your way along anything the party comes up with. I think that a good scenario, though, always helps you in the process, either by giving you some basic info to expand upon by improvising, or by taking into account more than one development for an event. And this scenario does this perfectly. There are a lot of ways PCs may get where the scenario wants them to be, and many of them are at least given a quick description. One key aspect of this scenario for me is that it nails what I think a good investigation is, especially in a game that's not focused on investigation per se, as Cyberpunk is. Agents of Desire always gives the group more than one way to get a specific clue. Furthermore, since there are multiple ways to discover what's important, the players feel like they earned the clue. This way, the investigation feels authentic to them, like they were the ones who determined the developments of the story. I also like that the scenario has many endings, and that it tries to consider multiple combinations so that the player can feel like their action and choices matter. Oh, and there's also a moral dilemma at the end. The players get to choose whether they get their money and close the contract, earning Rogue's approval, or to forget the money and the reputation and do what a good, law-abiding citizen does, calling the NCPD. There are also middle ground endings, where the PCs close the contract, get their reward, but do not encourage Kodai's delusion. They'll need to get creative for that to work, and maybe even lucky in a few roles, but the fact that the writers accounted for that possibility is great in my opinion. I'd like to spend a few words on the NPC's design too. In this scenario, there are some examples of very good NPC characterization in my opinion. Take Maurice, the caustic maître of the Lune Bleu, or Lotus, the reclusive genius of technology. Kodai is a very layered and interesting character too, and some of these NPCs, such as Lotus Lamarche, might even stay in the PC's story after the scenario as resourceful allies. Last but not least, the story is open-ended, and I really dig that. It has a clear end for Kodai's story, while at the same time giving you, the GM, the option to further expand on the scenario, delving on the theme of the AIs and what is their ultimate destiny. The Soul Killer itself might also be a good lead to pursue if you want to expand the scenario's events into a fully fledged campaign. Lotus might still have a copy stored somewhere, or maybe Kodai kept another one the first time he got his hands on the one he used for Isha, and so on. This scenario has very few weaknesses, and most of them are details or secondary issues. Anyway, I'll list a few. First off, there are no maps for tactical combat in the scenario. The two fights with the Saturday Night Butt Kickers have no map at all. They would have been a nice addition, although you can certainly use the many battle maps you can find on the web. Second, there is no art for Jane Gatsby, Maurice, and Lotus Lamarche. You will hear me say this a lot of times on this channel. And yes, I know budgets is an issue, but this is still an area of possible improvement for me, so I might as well point that out. Third, the motivation to pursue some of the most interesting leads in the investigation, such as Kodai's apartment or Lotus Lamarche, are too weak and need some work on your part to properly function unless you have a very proactive group. Fourth, The relationship between Aisha and Kodai's agent might not be evident until the PCs get to talk with Lotus Lamarche. This scenario, however, assumes that the PCs will still look for Kodai's phone even after learning that Aisha is not real thanks to the investigation at Lune Bleu. This might be a pitfall, so be ready to intervene or at least be aware of it. Fifth, as Reddit user Sparky McDibben points out in the review of the scenario, to which you can find the link in the blurb down below, it's a little unclear how Aisha's engram makes the high-class high society any money at all. I think the answer here is that having an agent with an engram installed on it is exactly that kind of weirdness that it's in vogue in the cyberpunk world. However, I do not agree with Sparky McDibben when they claim that the implication of having a copy extant of Soulkiller raises a lot of stakes in the Times of the Red, because the program is worth a ton and having it would be the equivalent of giving the PCs a suitcase nuke, in their words. First off, as Sparky themselves acknowledge, the adventure avoids the PCs ever interact with the program, and the only person who ever ran it was Lotus Lamarche, and he long deleted it since, out of guilt. Second, as far as I understand, Kodai's phone doesn't actually have a soul killer in it. It just has a personality construct, an engram, inscribed upon it through the soul killer. So the high society ice crew is not copying the soul killer itself, just Aisha's engram, which is way less valuable. They have a file, not the software. I think that this scenario is so good that I have a hard time thinking about people who wouldn't have fun with it. I would say that probably this isn't a great scenario for very inexperienced GMs because it has many mobile parts with all those optional developments and endings. It also lacks both material support, such as some keyed maps, battle maps, and some handouts. And if you don't have very proactive players, well, sometimes they might get stuck and you'll need to pull them out of stagnation. The scenario gives you a few ways to do so, but all feel a bit forced and somehow unearned by the players, at least for me. As I said before, sometimes the motivation for the group to go to specific locations are not as strong, and you need a good GM to provide motivation without railroading the game. So, if you are very new to Cyberpunk Red, I'd advise you to start from another, easier scenario, then come back to this one as soon as you have a few games under your belt and you wish to try out something a little bit more complex. Also, if your group is not proactive at all and likes to be led along the story, you should be ready to use the Fixer and Aisha's phone calls to steer your players. This scenario is very easy to recommend. It's good for novice GMs looking for a scenario that is ready to be played without too many adjustments because it works on itself. It's even better for experienced GMs looking for a non-linear adventure to toy with. This scenario can be very fun to run if you allow for some improv and let your characters do what they want. It's also a good fit for proactive and creative groups, since the many optional developments allow for some out-of-the-box thinking. I would recommend Agents of Desire also to a group who likes to focus on exploration and role-playing instead of combat, since the whole thing can be played with few to zero fights. I think that this scenario is a solid choice for those who like investigation and mystery, and are looking for something more complex than the old good retrieve that item from a gig. And I mean both players and GM here, since all should have fun. Lastly, I'd recommend the scenario to whoever is interested in themes such as cyberpsychosis or artificial intelligence, and in particular to players who like complex moral choices. So, this scenario is one of my favorites in Tales of the Red, and I can't wait to play it again with different groups to see where it goes next time I get to run it. Agents of Desire is cleverly designed, fun to run and to play. It's not railroaded and has a lot of optional developments and multiple endings. It reads and plays as an RPG tale, not a book, and it is so crucial. If you're comfortable with the team it deals with, I would suggest you to give it a shot, because you won't regret it. Thanks for watching, chooms. This channel is still very small, and I willingly choose to focus on what I am actually playing instead of what's trending, because I like to convey my enthusiasm and expertise for things I am actually playing. RPGs are not just books, so you cannot completely evaluate a scenario by just reading it. I do this out of love and passion. Anyway, if you wish to support me, I'd really appreciate any like you can spare, and if you feel particularly kind today, a subscription will be prime. If you found this video helpful, please check my other Cyberpunk Red contents. At the moment, I have an expanded guide to Cyberpunk Red roles and other reviews of Tales of the Red scenarios on the channel. Until the next video, stay tuned, chooms, because Night City never sleeps, and neither does RPG.